He thought he had found the perfect retreat. But when he discovered a trap door in his cabin and hired someone else to open it, he realized it was the worst mistake of his life. Subscribe and write where you're watching this video from. Marcus Reed had never imagined he would find the courage to leave behind his corporate life. For more than a decade, he had endured the endless meetings, the fluorescent-lit corridors, and the cramped office that reeked of microwaved lunches and desperation. Day after day, he had taken the same elevator to the same floor, stared at the same computer screen, and returned each night to an apartment where the neighbor's television seeped through paper-thin walls. The exhaustion had carved itself into his bones, aging him before his time, and he often wondered if this hollow routine was all life would ever offer him. But after his mother's sudden passing, something fundamental shifted within him. She had worked tirelessly until her final day, saving every penny and sacrificing every pleasure, only to leave this world without ever truly living on her own terms. That realization shook Marcus to his core. He liquidated his modest savings, resigned from his position, and began searching for something entirely different, something authentic. The cabin listing had appeared almost too good to be true. A rustic log structure nestled on 12 acres of dense woodland, complete with a stone fireplace, wraparound porch, and a small creek that meandered through the property. The price seemed unusually reasonable for such privacy and acreage, but Marcus convinced himself not to question good fortune. Perhaps the seller needed quick cash. Perhaps it was simply meant to be. He signed the papers within days and soon found himself standing on the weathered wooden steps of his new sanctuary, inhaling the crisp scent of cedar and damp moss. The air felt pure here, untainted, and each breath seemed to reach deeper into his lungs than any he had drawn in the city. Initially, the cabin felt foreign and ancient. The floorboards groaned under his weight. The windows rattled with every gust of mountain wind, and sometimes the logs themselves seemed to whisper as they settled in the cool evenings. But Marcus found these imperfections endearing. He arranged his few belongings throughout the rooms, unpacked boxes of novels, hung photographs of his parents, and positioned his mother's antique mantel clock above the hearth. Each day brought new discoveries about his refuge. The wildflowers that dotted the meadow in morning light, the deer that moved like shadows between the pines, and the gentle way mist rose from the creek at daybreak. He spent hours walking barefoot through the grass, relishing the sensation of earth beneath his feet, a connection he had never experienced while hurrying across concrete sidewalks. The locals at the general store were cordial when he introduced himself, though he detected something guarded in their expressions whenever he mentioned his specific location. It was subtle, a momentary hesitation, a flicker of concern in their eyes, but Marcus did not press for details. They received him with reserved friendliness, a city transplant who had chosen isolation over community. An weathered man behind the counter, his hands gnarled from decades of manual labor, made an offhand comment that lingered in Marcus's thoughts longer than it should have. "That old cabin of yours," the man muttered while counting change. "It's got a history. Some things are better left undisturbed," he added with the casual tone of someone discussing the weather. Yet his stare was penetrating, as if gauging Marcus's response. Marcus chuckled politely, dismissing it as rural folklore, the kind of tales that isolated communities preserve to keep their past alive. But when he returned home that evening, the remark echoed in his mind. He stood on his porch, gazing across the clearing toward the line of trees that enclosed his property. The air grew chillier as darkness fell, and for a moment he wondered if there truly was something about his cabin that warranted caution. It was 3 weeks later, while rearranging furniture in the main room, that Marcus made the discovery. As he dragged the heavy oak dining table to a new position, he noticed an irregularity in the wooden floor beneath where it had stood. The planks in that section were cut differently, forming a perfect rectangle about 3 feet square. When he knelt and examined them closely, he could see the faint outline of hinges along one edge, nearly invisible beneath layers of stain and varnish. His pulse quickened as he realized what he was looking at. A trapdoor. The revelation both thrilled and unsettled him. He traced the edges with his fingertips, feeling the slight depression where the boards met. There was definitely a handle or latch mechanism, but it was so seamlessly integrated that he could barely detect it. The craftsmanship was remarkable, designed to be completely concealed unless someone knew exactly where to look. Marcus spent the rest of the evening circling the spot, his mind racing with possibilities. Perhaps it led to a root cellar or storm shelter. Maybe the previous owners had used it for storage or as protection during severe weather. The idea of hidden history beneath his feet was intoxicating. There was something compelling about discovering traces of those who had lived here before him. Yet beneath his excitement lurked a thread of unease. If this was merely a storage space, why had it been concealed so expertly, hidden as if meant to be forgotten forever? That night, sleep proved elusive. He lay in bed, listening to the cabin's natural sounds, the creaking of logs, the whisper of wind through the eaves, the steady rhythm of his mother's clock in the living room. Each time he closed his eyes, he envisioned the trap door beneath the dining table, the mysterious space that lay just below his floor. The image refused to fade, hovering in his thoughts like a shadow just beyond comprehension. He shifted restlessly, pressing his face into the pillow, and told himself that it was nothing more than natural curiosity about his new home. Yet deep down, beneath rational thought, a question persisted, echoing softly like distant thunder. What lay beneath those carefully hidden boards? Though he would not admit it to himself, Marcus knew his peaceful mountain retreat had just become something far more complex. The following morning, Marcus rose before dawn, his mind already consumed by thoughts of what he had discovered. He brewed coffee and sat at the kitchen counter, staring through the window at the misty forest while the trap door dominated his thoughts. No matter how he tried to rationalize it as simple storage or a mundane basement access, curiosity gnawed at him with relentless persistence. He knew that if he didn't investigate, the image of that concealed rectangle would haunt every quiet moment in his new sanctuary. But as morning progressed into afternoon, Marcus found himself hesitating. Each time he approached the dining table, each time he considered moving it aside and attempting to open the hidden entrance, something held him back. His hands would tremble slightly, his chest would tighten, and he would find reasons to busy himself with other tasks. He rearranged books, organized kitchen cabinets, and even took long walks through the woods, but the trap door pulled at his thoughts like a magnet. By evening, he had reached a decision that surprised even himself. He would hire someone else to open it. The realization came with a mixture of relief and embarrassment. He, a grown man who had summoned the courage to abandon his entire life in the city, was too anxious to lift a few wooden boards in his own home. But the feeling persisted nonetheless, a deep reluctance that seemed to emanate from some primal instinct warning him away. The next morning, Marcus drove into town and stopped at the hardware store. Behind the counter was Tom Bradley, a local handyman whose business card he had noticed pinned to the community bulletin board. Tom was a sturdy man in his 50s, with calloused hands and the weathered face of someone who had spent decades working with tools. When Marcus explained that he needed help accessing what appeared to be a concealed entrance beneath his cabin floor, Tom's expression grew thoughtful. "Trapdoor, you say?" Tom rubbed his grizzled chin. Those old cabins sometimes had root cellars or storage spaces. "Makes sense, I suppose." But there was something in his tone, a slight hesitation that made Marcus wonder if Tom knew more than he was saying. Still, the handyman agreed to come out the following afternoon, and Marcus felt a wave of relief wash over him. The day of Tom's visit passed slowly. Marcus found himself pacing the cabin, straightening things that didn't need straightening, checking the time every few minutes. When Tom's pickup truck finally rumbled up the dirt driveway, Marcus met him on the porch with an eagerness that bordered on desperation. "So where's this mysterious entrance?" Tom asked, hefting his toolbox as they entered the cabin. Marcus led him to the dining table and pointed to the floor beneath it. Tom knelt and examined the planks with the practiced eye of someone who understood wood and construction. He traced the hidden hinges with his finger, nodded approvingly at the craftsmanship, then looked up at Marcus with a curious expression. "This is fine work," he said. "Whoever built this knew what they were doing. Question is, why go to all the trouble to hide it so well?" The same question that had been plaguing Marcus, but coming from Tom's lips, it sounded even more ominous. Together, they moved the heavy table aside, fully exposing the concealed section of floor. Tom retrieved a pry bar from his toolbox and began working at what appeared to be a barely visible latch mechanism. After several minutes of careful manipulation, they heard a soft click, and one edge of the trap door lifted slightly. "There we go," Tom muttered, but his voice lacked enthusiasm. He glanced at Marcus, who had stepped back involuntarily. "You sure you want to see what's down there?" Marcus nodded, though his mouth had gone dry. Tom gripped the edge of the trap door and lifted. The hinges, despite their age, moved smoothly and silently, as if they had been recently oiled. What they revealed took both men's breath away. Below the floor was not a simple root cellar or storage space, but the top of a stone staircase descending into darkness. Cool air rushed up from the opening, carrying with it the scent of damp stone and earth that had not seen daylight in decades. The craftsmanship of the stairs was remarkable, each stone carefully fitted and worn smooth by countless footsteps. Tom whistled low under his breath. "Well, I'll be damned. This goes way down." He retrieved a powerful flashlight from his toolbox and aimed the beam into the opening. The light revealed the first dozen steps before disappearing into shadows. "Looks like it leads to some kind of chamber." Marcus's heart hammered in his chest. This was far more than he had bargained for. The trap door had been mysterious enough, but this was the entrance to an entirely hidden world beneath his cabin. He found himself both terrified and fascinated, unable to look away from the stone steps that vanished into darkness. "Should we?" he began, then stopped. The truth was, he didn't want to go down there. Every instinct screamed at him to close the trap door and pretend he had never found it. But Tom, apparently untroubled by such hesitations, was already swinging his legs through the opening. "Might as well see what we're dealing with," Tom said, his boots finding purchase on the stone steps. "Could be structural issues, water damage, who knows what." His flashlight beam danced ahead of him as he descended, leaving Marcus alone with the gaping hole in his floor. For several minutes, Marcus heard only the sound of Tom's footsteps echoing from below, growing fainter as the handyman descended deeper. Then, suddenly, the footsteps stopped. The silence stretched long enough that Marcus began to worry. "Tom," he called down the stairway. "Everything okay down there?" Tom's voice drifted up from the depths, but there was something different about it now, a tension that hadn't been there before. "Marcus, you need to see this. There's a whole chamber down here, and it's not what I expected." Against every instinct that warned him to stay away, Marcus retrieved his own flashlight and lowered himself through the trapdoor. The stone steps were cold beneath his feet, slick with condensation that had accumulated over years of darkness. He gripped the rough stone walls for balance, his light trembling slightly with each breath. The air grew colder as he descended, heavy with the scent of minerals and age. At the bottom of the steps, the passage opened into a narrow corridor. The ceiling arched just above their heads, forcing both men to duck slightly as they moved forward. Their footsteps echoed with eerie clarity, bouncing off the stone and disappearing into the darkness ahead. Marcus could hear the steady drip of water somewhere in the distance, a sound that seemed to magnify the profound silence of this underground space. Tom had stopped about 20 feet ahead, his flashlight trained on something Marcus couldn't yet see. As Marcus approached, he realized why the handyman had called for him. The corridor opened into a much larger chamber, and scattered across its floor were remnants of human activity. Rusted tools, fragments of wooden crates, lengths of corroded chain, and other debris that spoke of deliberate use rather than natural formation. "Look at this," Tom said, his voice barely above a whisper. He aimed his flashlight at the far wall, where wooden support beams jutted out at irregular angles. Most had collapsed, leaving only splintered remains, but their presence suggested this chamber had once housed some kind of structure or platform. Marcus swept his own light across the space, revealing more details that made his stomach tighten. The floor was littered with artifacts, some recognizable, others corroded beyond identification. A pickaxe head, its handle long since rotted away. Scraps of fabric that disintegrated when touched. Fragments of glass and pottery. And everywhere, the sense that this place had been abandoned in haste. "What do you think it was?" Marcus asked, though he dreaded the answer. Tom examined a rusted length of chain, his expression grim. "Hard to say. Could have been mining, though I don't know of any mineral deposits in this area. Could have been storage for something valuable." Or, he trailed off, but the implication hung in the air between them. Or it could have been something darker. As they moved deeper into the chamber, Tom's flashlight caught something that made both men freeze. Carved into the stone wall were faint scratches, too irregular to be decorative, but too deliberate to be accidental. Marcus approached cautiously and traced the markings with his finger. They felt like tally marks, groups of vertical lines scored into the stone as if someone had been counting days or attempts or something else entirely. Jesus, Tom breathed. Someone was keeping track of something down here. But it was what they found in the smallest alcove that truly shattered Marcus's peace of mind. Hidden behind a collapsed beam was a collection of personal belongings, clearly abandoned in desperation. A shattered lantern, boots with their soles worn through, and scraps of paper so deteriorated that most were illegible. But one fragment, protected between layers of leather, still bore faint traces of ink. Marcus held it carefully in the beam of his flashlight, and what he read made his blood run cold. The date was clear enough, 1897. Below it, in a shaking hand, someone had written, "Cannot get out. The others are gone. God help whoever finds this." The words seemed to reverberate through the chamber long after Marcus had read them aloud. Tom stepped back, his face pale in the artificial light. "We should leave," he said quietly. "Right now." But Marcus was already moving toward another alcove, drawn by a compulsion he couldn't explain. His light revealed more artifacts, more evidence of desperate human presence. And there, scratched into the wall with what must have been tremendous effort, were words that made his heart stop. "The door is sealed. We cannot leave." The realization hit him like a physical blow. This wasn't just an abandoned storage space or forgotten mining operation. People had been trapped down here, sealed in by someone or something that had blocked their escape. The tally marks, the desperate messages, the personal belongings left behind, they all told the same horrific story. "Marcus!" Tom's voice was urgent now. "We're leaving. Now." They climbed the stone steps in silence, their flashlight beams dancing wildly with their hurried movements. When they emerged into the cabin, the ordinary domestic space felt almost surreal after the horror they had discovered below. Tom immediately began gathering his tools, his hands shaking slightly. "I'm going to pretend I never saw that," he said, avoiding Marcus's eyes. "And if you're smart, you'll seal that thing up and never speak of it again." But even as Tom spoke the words, Marcus knew it was too late. The knowledge of what lay beneath his cabin had already taken hold of him, burrowing into his thoughts like a parasite. The messages scratched into stone, the evidence of people trapped and desperate, the tally marks counting down to some unimaginable fate. They were seared into his memory now, impossible to forget. Tom left without another word, his truck disappearing down the mountain road with unseemly haste. Marcus stood alone in his cabin, staring at the open trapdoor, and felt the weight of his terrible mistake settling around him like a shroud. That night, the sounds began. Soft at first, barely audible above the normal creaking of the old logs. A rhythmic tapping that seemed to emanate from beneath the floorboards. Marcus told himself it was settling, expansion and contraction, anything but what his terrified mind suggested. But as the hours passed, the tapping grew more deliberate, more insistent, until it sounded almost like someone knocking to be let out. He had wanted peace and solitude, but instead he had uncovered a nightmare that would never let him rest. The trap door gaped like a wound in his floor, and no matter how he tried to ignore it, he could feel the presence of the chamber below, pressing upward into his sanctuary with the weight of its dark history. Marcus realized then that Tom had been right about one thing. Some things were better left undisturbed. But it was too late for such wisdom now. He had hired someone else to open the door because he lacked the courage to do it himself, but courage had nothing to do with it. Some doors, once opened, could never be closed again. And as he lay sleepless in his bed, listening to the sounds from below and wondering what other secrets his mountain refuge might hold, Marcus understood that he had traded one kind of prison for another. The corporate world had trapped his body, but this place had claimed something far worse. It had claimed his peace of mind, and perhaps, if the messages carved in stone were to be believed, something even more precious than that. The tapping continued through the night, patient and persistent, like something that had been waiting a very long time for someone to finally hear it. And Marcus, despite every rational thought that told him otherwise, couldn't shake the growing certainty that whatever lay in that chamber below was no longer content to remain hidden. If this story shocked you, just wait until you see what's coming next. Hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell so you never miss our most unbelievable discoveries. Don't stop here. Check out the other videos on our channel right now, each one more jaw-dropping than the last. And if you know someone who loves a mystery as much as you do, share this video with them. They won't believe what happens next.